Well, let me put it Jeffrey Epstein himself, yes, he's dead. Any investigation into potential other bad guys will always be open if we have evidence that supports in any way, shape, or form that we can make a case.
But of course, there are many who feel like there's already enough evidence to continue investigating. And ultimately, all of this is sort of connected, at least in terms of what it says about the current Department of Justice, which is actually something you had Rhode Island Senator Jack Reed hitting on with his time on the clock.
You know, this whole hearing, I think, is exposing something, which is, to me, very frightening. You're a very gifted lawyer. But from my perspective, you have very little faith to the Constitution and the people of America, and you're the president's consigliere.
Your perspective is completely wrong, Senator,
Well,
respectfully.
I think the facts will prove me right.
But also, while you have Trump and Blanche seemingly manipulating the levers of government to enrich friends and supporters, we then have to talk about how Google and Blackstone are seemingly gunning to control the puppet strings behind the AI industry. Though also, it might not work as well as they're hoping. So they just announced plans to create an artificial intelligence cloud company that'll compete with the likes of NVIDIA for control of the infrastructure behind AI. And Google, they're reportedly providing the hardware with their new specialized chips, and Blackstone, they're providing the initial $5 billion in equity capital, making them a majority owner. And according to the announcement, the plans to have 500 megawatts worth of computing capacity by 2027, which I guess just for scale, it's about the same electric power required to serve a mid-sized city. And that's apparently just the beginning, with the announcement promising to substantially increase capacity over time. And so this deal, it is Google tossing down the gauntlet at NVIDIA over the chips required to make AI function. Because even as demand for the computing power necessary to train and run advanced AI models has exploded, most major companies, they're just relying on computing infrastructure.
Interesting.
But this new, unnamed company, they're going to use Google's specialized chips known as tensor processing units, or TPUs, in their data centers. And that part on
God.
Talk about why a ton of people are freaking out about Jeff Bezos right now. Right? And a lot of it's stemming from the CNBC interview that he did that sparked a lot of backlash online. And we'll start with a bit that's probably gone the most viral.
I pay billions of dollars in taxes. And it's a perfect, again, if people want me to pay more billions, right, then let's have that debate. But don't pretend, that's going to solve the problem. You could double the taxes I pay, and it's not going to help that teacher in Queens.
So that did not go over well with a ton of people, including fellow billionaire and California gubernatorial candidate Tom Steyer, who wrote, "This is bullshit. I promise you, tax billionaires invest in schools."
This is bullshit.
Mamdani saying, "I know a few teachers in Queens who would beg to differ." And generally, you had others saying that the optics of a billionaire that's sitting at his rocket factory, saying that him paying more in taxes, that it wouldn't help anyone, is absurd. Arguing, hey,
no, of course not.
That little theory to test. Try it out. See what happens. But also, I'll say, in fairness, his tax commentary came amid a larger conversation about wealth inequality and how to address it. Right? And actually, his main point was that if you really want to help low-income Americans, they should pay no taxes at all.
It's kind of a tale of two economies. So you have a bunch of people in this country who are doing really well, but you also have a bunch of people in this country who are struggling. Politicians are
the majority
using the kind of age-old technique. So there's this tale of two economies, and they're using this age-old technique of, picking a villain and pointing fingers. But the problem is that doesn't solve anything. A nurse in Queens who makes $75,000 a year pays more than $12,000 a year in taxes. Does that really make sense? So people talk about, making the tax system.
Oh, sure.
How about we start by having the nurse in Queens not pay taxes? Why is somebody at all? The bottom half of income earners in this country pay only 3% of the taxes. It's only 3%. We can find 3%.
Now, one of the things I'll say with that is that according to the Tax Foundation, if you look into it, the nurse with a $75,000 salary that's being talked about is not actually in the bottom group of earners. In 2023, the bottom half of taxpayers made around $54,000 or less. But there are politicians who agree with this kind of thinking. Earlier this year, for example, you had Senator Cory Booker proposing something called the Keep Your Pay Act, which calls for the first $75,000 of income to be tax-free in households filing joint returns. So, there is a conversation to be had, though at the same time, you have people saying the thing about him not paying millions more in taxes and don't tax people that are making under $75,000, that is seemingly disconnected or adverse to each other. But also, I'll say that was far from the only subject that Bezos sparked outrage on when it comes to his personal massive wealth. Right when it came to charitable donations, he said that he plans on giving away most of his wealth during his lifetime, but he also said,
if I do my job right, the value to society and civilization from my for-profit companies will be much, much larger than the than the good that I do with my charitable giving.
And there what you saw is we had people questioning the good of his for-profit companies because their efficiency comes at a cost. You know, there have been reports on high rates of warehouse worker injuries at Amazon, workers saying that they struggle just to afford food and rent. Some even saying Jeff Bezos' companies exploit taxpayers to be successful, saying they receive enormous tax breaks and subsidies and force taxpayers to subsidize the poverty wages they pay their employees, driving their profitability. And that, as others say, you know, sure, his company is going to improve the lives of a lot of people, but Bezos is so rich, why doesn't he just do both and up his charitable giving as well? Especially since on the Forbes billionaire list, his philanthropy score sits at a 2 out of 5. Also of note with all this is that when it comes to his own enterprises, he spoke about the mass layoffs that recently happened at the Washington Post. Or with the interviewer noting that in the past, Bezos referred to the paper as a public trust, so why not subsidize the business to maintain that? And to that he said,
The Post needs to be a profitable enterprise that stands on its own 2 feet. It needs to be.
Does it?
Yes.
I mean, that's the question. Some people say it should be a trust.
And let me tell you why.
Okay.
Because it's a measure of its relevance. If people won't pay for our product, it's not a good enough product. I don't want it to be a charity. It doesn't need to be, and it shouldn't be.
But there you have people questioning how laying off hundreds of reporters is going to improve or make the product more relevant. And that, as you had others noting that at least some of the paper's big subscriber loss, it's actually because of Bezos' own personal actions. As we've talked about, they lost 10% of their subscribers after Bezos said that the paper should not make an endorsement in the 2024 election, and more dropped after he said that he'd reshape the paper's editorial strategy, many believing that he made those moves to curry favor with Trump. Though I will say he pushed back on claims that he is a pro-Trump businessman.
I'm on the side of America, and that is so important. And that's where business leaders should be. We get perceived as being partisan or whatever. I was helping Obama every chance I could. I was helping Biden every chance I could.
But then also with that, he gave Trump some praise.
Trump has lots of good ideas, and he's been right about a lot of things. You have to give him credit where credit is due. I mean, I'm comparing him to his first term.
Yeah.
And I think he is a more mature, more disciplined version of himself than he was in his first term.
Are you fucking serious?
Mature and disciplined. It took some people by surprise, and it kind of did absolutely nothing to help the fact that people see him as being in the president's pocket. People arguing, okay, just look at some of the posts on this man's Truth Social page and tell me that he is mature. But, with all that said, I then got to pass the question off to you of what are your thoughts here with Bezos? Do you agree with his takes or the take, or do you think that he's undermining what he himself can do to better the country? Also, do you see him as a nonpartisan figure as he says that he is?
No.
Not really any opinions and reactions here. But the next up, in some crazy news we should talk about today, there's a bitter custody battle between an influencer and a former boy band member that's now been escalated into federal murder for hire charges. So this is Gabriela Gonzalez. She's a 24-year-old content creator with roughly 500,000 followers on both her TikTok and Instagram pages. She posts lifestyle and travel content along with videos documenting her day-to-day life as the mom of a 7-year-old daughter, Lavender.
I became a single teen mother at, I would just say 17 because I was basically doing it by myself. 5 years ago, being alone was like the worst thing that could have happened to me. And now being alone is the best.
Right, and then Lavender's father is the other big player in this story, and that's Jack Avery. He's a former member of the boy band Why Don't We, which had some moderate success in the 2010s. And a big key thing with all this is that Gabriella and Jack, they're not together anymore. In fact, they've been locked in a bitter custody battle over Lavender for years now. Back in 2021, Gabriella reportedly started painting Jack as an unfit and dangerous parent in court. At the same time, her dad, Francisco Gonzalez, reportedly hired a PI to collect photos and videos of Jack, trying to find evidence of him smoking, drinking, or just anything that could be used against him in court. Right, and that appears to be when things started to snowball, because from there, Francisco allegedly talked to Gabriella's new boyfriend, Kai Cordry, to try to recruit someone to threaten and harass Jack. And because of Kai's position as a surf instructor in Hawaii, they settled on a retired MMA fighter living in Maui. Though, it doesn't actually look like the person got involved at any point. But it was Gabriella that kicked things to the next level, because it was around this time that she began to openly talk about wanting Jack dead and hiring a hitman to do the job. She and Kai even allegedly went online to find an assassin on the dark web. In May of 2021, it looks like Kai made an account on a murder for hire site under the screen name Lizard King 69, with prosecutors saying that he identified Jack as the target, gave an address, and even said that Jack, quote, should be killed by whatever method was easiest. And Francisco reportedly gave Kai $14,000 that was transferred into crypto and used as front money for this whole scheme. First, $10,000 into the guise of payment for web services, and then another $4,000 later on. But these three masterminds, they very quickly caught the attention of the feds. I mean, by September of 2021, Kai was reportedly talking to the FBI agent who was posing as a hitman from the site where they posted Jack as the target. The agent reportedly spoke with Kai on the phone about Jack as the target, payment, and proof of death, with Kai allegedly saying that Gabriella wanted Jack dead and that her father would pay for it. And Francisco then allegedly confirmed his involvement by texting the agent a password established in a previous payment. And then about a year later, prosecutors say that Gabriella talked to Kai on a recorded call about those communications with the supposed hitman and how to respond to the threat of exposure. Now, through all this, Jack says that he was warned that someone was trying to kill him, saying that FBI agents had contacted him to give him a heads up. But it wasn't until just recently that Gabriella, her father, and Kai were finally arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and solicitation to commit murder, which if they are convicted, that means them facing 25 years to life in state prison. You had the LA County District Attorney's Office releasing a statement saying, this is a lengthy investigation that was initiated by the FBI and officially turned over to our office. Most fathers raise their children to respect the law, but here we have a dad who allegedly helped his daughter and her boyfriend break the law in the most sinister way imaginable. Right, and so as far as what happens from here, we have to wait to see. Gabriella's arraignment, it happened yesterday, but it ended without a plea, and her lawyer requested more time to review the evidence. Right, and she's scheduled to go back in tomorrow, but what we do know is that Jack has filed for a domestic violence restraining order from Gabriella and full legal and physical custody of their daughter. With his filing saying that the ongoing harassment and safety concerns caused him fear of death, chronic anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And adding, Gabriella attempted to kill me by hiring a hitman. Gabriella is not stable and not able to act in the best interest of our daughter. Which, that seems about right. That's kind of actually, if anything, putting it lightly. And it kind of gets thrown on top of the pile of just news stories that remind us that the influencers or the people that we see on our phones or whatever screen, we never really know what's going on behind the scenes. And then there's more we got to dive into in just a minute, but first let me thank a sponsor and say, let's be real. At this point, it's not the night out that gets you, it's the next morning when you have things to do. Right? Having a good time's easy, but showing up the next day like a functioning human, that can be a real challenge. And that is also why I've been using today's sponsor, ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic. This isn't one of those drink more water and manifest wellness type fixes. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And how it works is that when you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. And it's a buildup of this byproduct, not just dehydration, that's to blame for rough days after drinking. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. I use it anytime I've got plans the next day, which is pretty much all the time, gym, work, like life just refusing to leave me alone. It's packed with reasons to get out there. Games, weddings, everything in between. Do not let the next morning slow you down. Just go to zbiotics.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco for 15% off your first order. Or hey, you can just scan that QR code and you'll feel your best tomorrow. But then, diving right back into the news, one of the things that we learned from the elections last night is that the Republican Party is the party of Donald Trump, though he is playing with fire. And the big races that cemented both of those things was Thomas Massie losing in Kentucky, Brad Raffensperger just getting crushed in Georgia. But also, given the numbers, especially those in Kentucky, you have many wondering, what is this going to mean in a general election? Right? Especially if Trump remains as unpopular as he is right now. And to really get to that place responsibly to talk about and answer that question, we have to look at Kentucky first, right? Especially Congressman Thomas Massie.
Thomas Massie's a terrible congressman. He's been a terrible congressman from day one. Dealing with him is just a horrible. I don't think he's a Republican. I think he's actually a Democrat. It's not easy beating incumbents, but we have a great guy running against Massie. Massie's a terrible, I think the worst congressman the Republican Party's ever had.
In reality, Massie votes for the Republican Party most of the time. But Massie opposed Trump's tax and spending budget package last year, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, because he said it would drive up the federal deficit. He also, of course, famously led the charge to release the Epstein files, and he's opposed the U.S. and Israeli war against Iran. And with that, condemned American aid to Israel and criticized the influence of the pro-Israel lobby in American politics. So all of that kind of together made him Trump's #1 target, as well as the target of the very same pro-Israel lobby that he spoke out against. $19 million was spent to benefit Massie's Trump-backed opponent, a former Navy SEAL by the name of Ed Galrine, including nearly $9.4 million from AIPAC and other pro-Israel interest groups. But with that, Candace Owens, who had become a vocal supporter of Massie, actually has a different take on this whole thing, saying that whatever the result, the money spent on this election showed that Trump has lost control of MAGA, and adding, having to run to the Zionist mafia to spend a record-breaking amount on a congressional seat means he knows fully well the party no longer marches to his command. And Tucker Carlson not only pushed a similar narrative, he took his message straight to the Israeli media this week, by telling the country's Channel 13 that Netanyahu, the media, and donors, they pushed Trump into a war against Iran.
Donors to Donald Trump, people in the media class here, were effectively working on behalf of the Israeli government. The Israeli prime minister pushed the U.S. president, who turned out to be far weaker than I understood, into a war that hurts the United States.
And with that, you've got people saying, while they think that Owens and Carlson, they are conspiracy theorists on a number of fronts, you have many arguing that Massey's race, it shows that there is a real conversation to be had around how money is being spent on politics in the states. Especially because in this case, the money appears to have paid off. Galrein defeated Massey with around 55% of the vote. And so one of the things you ended up seeing was Massey kicking off his concession speech by saying,
I would have come out sooner, but I had to.